All right, we are live and recording. It looks like 20 out of 44 people have arrived. So I'm going to start off by quickly describing how to use Crowdcast, even though I think it's pretty self-explanatory. On the right-hand side, you can type questions. So if you have questions at the end of the presentation, you can feel free to type something out there, and then I will relay the questions to Leanne. Or at the bottom, there's also a button that says Ask a Question. So you can feel free to throw a question in there. I'll be checking them both. So Leanne's presentation will be 45 minutes, and then, well, around there, we'll see. And then at the end, we'll have time for questions. I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Danny. I'm the English Communications Officer for the ArcticNet Student Association. And quickly, I will introduce Leanne. So Dr. Leanne Fishback is a research associate at the Churchill Northern Studies Centre in Churchill, Manitoba. Her research focuses on environmental freshwater geochemistry, investigating the impacts of environmental change in the Churchill region. Much of this research is conducted with citizen science volunteers as part of the Earthwatch project called Climate Change at the Arctic's Edge. For more than 15 years, she has conducted long-term monitoring on key environmental variables along the western coast of Hudson Bay to explore the impacts of change while communicating scientific findings with local community members and citizen scientists. Leanne has spent more than 25 years working throughout the Canadian Arctic, including living and working in Churchill for the last 18 years. So welcome, Leanne. Thank you so much for being here. And you already have your title slide up, so feel free to get started.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Danny, for the invite. It is really, really awesome to have this opportunity to chat a little bit with the folks online. So I've got a bit of a presentation I'd like to share about some of the citizen science work that I've been able to accomplish in the Churchill area. And then the second part of the presentation will be a little bit about how I got to that as a career path, and then of course questions at the end, as Danny mentioned. So while I'm sharing my screen, I can only see the screen that I'm sharing with you, and I can't really see anything else. So if you do have any questions, you can direct them directly to Danny, and she'll jump in or let me know if there's an issue with anything going on. So yeah, tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about life at the Arctic's edge, and I love this shot. I took that just this fall as the conditions were starting to change in Churchill. I found this awesome bench in the middle of nowhere that I got my husband to take a picture of me on, because I really think it's interesting to think about kind of life at the Arctic's edge. And so the subtitle is Looking for Long-Term Environmental Change in a Subarctic Landscape with a Citizen Science Approach. And I really, before I get started on the presentation, have to thank the Churchill Northern Studies Centre, the field station in Churchill, for the long-term employment and the base for hosting teams through Earthwatch. And if you aren't familiar with Earthwatch Institute, it's a nonprofit organization. And really the key thing they try to do is match local folks or general public folks who would like to go and participate in a science project. So they're not necessarily scientists by any stretch. They can be, anything from teenagers or families, right up through corporations, teachers, and folks who are retired looking for something to do to contribute. And they send them out to different research projects. They have about 50 projects worldwide. And of course, in a global pandemic, they're not able to do this. So 2020 has been a quiet year for citizen science programs with Earthwatch, but they've been doing a lot of other really great outreach programs. And if you're interested, they do have a really awesome webinar series called Science Matters that we were able to be the first folks to talk with their participants with. So just to talk a little bit about what we're talking about in terms of climate change or environmental change at the Arctic's edge, I put this map together. I grabbed this from Merit Teretsky's Nature paper, which talks about the sensitivity of Arctic permafrost. So you can see Churchill on the west coast of Hudson Bay there in a red zone. where we're expecting there to be quite a bit of thawing, and also the other site in the Mackenzie and Selwyn Mountains on the border of NWT and Yukon, also in an area maybe of more gradual thawing, but also at the edge of the Arctic. And that one's at Arctic tree line, or sorry, Churchill is at Arctic latitudinal tree line. And in the Mackenzies, we're looking at latitudinal tree line in Churchill, altitudinal tree line in the Mackenzie Mountains. So we're first going to talk a little bit about Churchill. And when we think about tree line, a lot of people think about a very distinct line on the ground where you walk out of the trees and out onto the tundra. And that's not really the case. There are a lot of different kinds of tree lines, and we're not going to talk all about those. But these are some of the things that we're thinking about at tree line here. So wetland environments, microbial communities, permafrost, tree lines, hydrology, and frog habitat. And, you know, in a few minutes, I can't talk about all of these tonight, but I'm going to try to hit some high level pieces of different pieces of our long-term project. Now, I keep saying we, so I do have to recognize my sort of partner in crime in this is Steve Mamet. So here's Steve and I at the weather station located in Wapask National Park, one of our southern locations in the Churchill region. And you're going to see a video in a minute. So I just want you to note that video is taken at 2.2 meters off the ground. And Steve and I have been working on this long-term project, following up from some initial work done by Dr. Peter Kershaw. So in Churchill, we have about 20 years of long-term data. And I want to share a little video with you of time lapse from this particular site. So we're standing on tundra here, looking into a small tree island in behind us. So I hope this video works. So this is the trees in that tree clump that were just behind us in the video. And if you'll notice upside down here, you can see 2014 is the starting year. And obviously it's the fall with the larch trees turning color here. So if I start this video, you see we had a few camera problems right off the bat, but it shows you from a photo taken each day how the conditions change here. So just really remember this piece of landscape, because you're going to see there's a December rain event. That's what it looks like. And this is a typical midwinter snow amount. And then a once-in-century blizzard, which actually covered the camera. Over 4 meters of snow accumulated. So you can see that snow disappear, and you can see the change that happens as a result of that large amount of snow coming in. So when we're thinking about trying to quantify climate change or the impacts of climate change on the environment, this was, you know, what I was hoping to kind of get towards. You know, these environments at Arctic tree line, at the edge of the Arctic, undergo a wide variety of conditions over the course of just 1 year. And what we're trying to do is think about how do we put that into context. Sorry, I don't want to show the video again, and kind of capture key pieces of data. And this is where citizen science teams come in. So we'll take a team of folks, teach them how to do a particular set of sampling we need. So this obviously is a winter team where we get them outside and we have a lot of fun, but we also do collect a lot of data. And really we use the citizen science teams as I don't want to say free labor, but really that's what it comes down to. Interested folks that we can train how to go out and blitz collect a lot of data in a really short period of time. And then these are the kinds of things that you can generate when you have that. So we have 11 different sites where we do this at here in Churchill. So I'm showing you a portion of that data. You can see it starts in about 2002, and this goes right up to 2020. So in 2020, we were actually able to collect our snowpack data right before the pandemic was starting. So one of the things that we collect is snow depth. And I start with this one, just most people can conceive of snow depth. It's pretty straightforward. Obviously, there are a lot of variations across the landscape. So we collect, we use these teams to collect, at a particular site, perhaps as many as, 100 or up to even larger amounts of data points. So each of these lines has different thicknesses to them, and the thicknesses represent the standard deviation for that particular year of data. So you're not just looking at one data point, you're looking at the mean with the line and then the shaded area indicating the variability. And one thing that you can get when you start to collect over long periods of time is you start to see some variation in snow depth even. And 2017 was a year, was a La Nina followed by an El Nino event. And that was where we have deeper snow in areas that are windswept typically. And in areas that aren't windswept, we had less snow. And you might look at this graph and think, that's really great, but what does that actually look like on the ground? So this is where I love to show a picture of what does that look like. So on the left-hand side, you've got a typical year in 2014, and on the right-hand side, you've got 2016. So you'll see those tree islands, for example, in 2014, they usually are good snow catchers. They're like a baseball mitt, and they catch lots of snow in there. So if you've got high wind or wind events, it will accumulate. And in 2016, an El Nino year where you have less wind, you can see the big difference in snowpack. And then the two photos at the bottom are an example of the windswept area in a fen, for example. So these are the pieces of data that you can start to collect when you have multiple groups of teams coming year after year, and you're able to collect data at a wide range of sites. So this one's density, and we'll spend a little bit more time looking at the density graph. So you'll see the top panel is Tree Island. So that's a group of trees out in the middle of tundra. And then treed, so those are areas where you have more like a typical forest. It's still a fairly open canopy forest at tree line, so 20% maybe canopy cover. We investigate some disturbed sites. So these two of the sites are fire sites, the FR ones, and then one which is a gravel remove site. And then we have some typically windswept sites where you don't have trees. So those are the 4 different panels that you're looking at. And I've left the highlighted bar for the El Nino, La Nina, because you can see a bit of the change in snow density. But one of the interesting things we see with snow density is that there is this long-term change in the character of the snow. And we hear this from some of the indigenous communities, and we also hear this from local people who are traveling on the land, that the snowpack is changing, the snow is different. And to them, that might be, that means that they would fall through the snow more often. So the snowpack isn't as dense or as hard, and it doesn't hold your weight. So lots of times you're falling through the snow. And this is confirmed at all of our sites, except we don't have a statistically significant trend in the Tree Island site. And that's because the snow is quite dense to start with, and the wind packs it in there, and it has stayed quite dense. So the dotted lines that you see on each of the panels are indications of statistically significant decreases in density. And I've listed the sites on the side there where the density is actually decreasing. So it's not decreasing at every site in the panel, but each type of site has a decreasing one. And this has really only become evident in, I would say, the last 4 to 5 years of data collection. So it really has taken this long period of record for us to get to the point where we're starting to see some of those trends. And typically we would want to collect for another 10 years to have a 30-year period to really be decisive with our trends. So invite me back in 10 years' time, and I'll maybe have a bit more to say about trends in some of the other factors as well. Because at this point, we're gonna leave kind of the field snowpack data collection. So just a reminder, this is a citizen science team working in 2020, this past year, out at the field. We also do lab work with the teams as well. And for those of you who have spent many hours laboring in the lab, if you can imagine having 10 folks to help you for 10 days process samples, you can get a lot of work done. And this project, we look at tree line foliage health. And so they do a lot of weighing of needles and counting needles. We take the new growth off the end of the branches, and each year we assess the health of those particular new growth needles. Now, as you would maybe expect, trees that are the most exposed are in the poorest condition. And the indicator we use for that is actually the conductance of water. So what you're looking at on the y-axis here is actually the ability of the needle to conduct water. So if it conducts quite a bit of water, that means that that needle, or the cuticle on that needle in particular, is quite damaged. And so the most exposed trees are those trees that are in tree islands. So those groups of trees out in the tundra, they take the full brunt of the wind during the winter. Next is the ecotone trees. So those are the trees that are right along transition between open tundra and forest. And then most protected, or the ones that the needles that should be in the best condition, are the ones that are in the forest. So this didn't come as a huge surprise to us that this was what our graphs were showing. But one thing that was quite interesting is we actually thought that on the windward side of the trees, you would see much poorer needle health. But we don't actually see that. Between the leeward, which is the downwind side of the tree, and the windward tree, the side facing into the wind, there's actually very little difference between the water loss. And so this is a project that we then extended into multiple years to try to see if, okay, is there a difference in the environmental conditions that's maybe driving the changes between the health of the needles rather than just the wind or the location on the tree. So there's just a little nugget on our tree foliage health. Since we're all facing winter right now, let's get out of winter and think a little bit about what would you do with a summer team? And that's where we get into wetland ecology. And this is really my specialty. Talking about tree health is definitely Steve's piece. We're both interested in snowpack because snowpack is what drives and provides water to a lot of the ponds in the Hudson Bay lowland system. So Western Hudson Bay, here's a little inset map to show you. Wraps all the way along the western coast of Hudson Bay. And this lowland is made up of somewhere around 40, maybe even as high as 60% surface water cover. So that photo in behind gives you a sense of just how many ponds there are. It's a very low-lying, most of these are just little depression ponds, and they're quite shallow. They're probably less than a meter, maybe as much as 2 meters at the very most deep. And they freeze to the bottom for the most part each winter. So one of the creatures that we're very interested in is the wood frog. And the wood frog is a medium-sized frog. It probably lives about 3 years here at the edge of the Arctic, maybe as much as 5 years in more southerly locations. They are one of the first frogs to breed. There are 2 species of frogs here in Churchill. This is the one we focus on because it does have such a wide distribution, and it's freeze tolerant. So I always remember when I look out the window at this time of year, I have to mention polar bears because we're talking about Churchill. But when I'm thinking about polar bears, I'm also thinking these guys live here too, which is really cool. And they're frozen. They're completely frozen and inanimate pretty much at this time of year. We won't see them until sometime in late May or early June. So we spend a lot of time with the citizen science teams doing active searching as well as passive trapping for organisms in these wetland environments, and also looking at water quality, so nutrient sampling as well as pH conductivity to categorize how these wetlands are changing over time. And it's amazing. The folks who are interested in some of these teams, they show up and they're happy to learn how to ID right down to inverts that they can see swimming in the pond or capturing with their nets and then using in these sorting trays. So this is the kind of natural pond sampling that we do. And I don't have time to talk about some of the results from that today. I'm going to talk a little bit about our experiment that goes along with this, because one of the things that we do with the citizen science teams is we collect natural observations, so things that are happening in the environment, but we also conduct experiments to try to get at process-based questions. And most of you are probably familiar with this. We use mesocosms, so you'll see these black tubs in the background. And if you don't know what mesocosms are, it's basically doing science in a bucket. And meso just indicates a medium-sized bucket that we're using. And again, a team of able participants is super helpful when you have 50 of these to look at and take care of every day. So each of these buckets, what we do for an experiment is try to hold as many things constant as we can, and then manipulate one variable. And one of the first few experiments we did was to use aquarium heaters to actually change the temperature of the water and see how that affected tadpole survival and growth. So using different heaters to simulate different types of temperature change. So I'm just going to give you a quick sneak peek and refer you to the publication. So this was one of the findings. You'll see temperature across the bottom of the graph and then tadpole weight up the side. Now there are two lines on this graph. The bottom solid line with the dotted lines on either side of it is at day 15 of tadpole growth. And so we pulled a selection of tadpoles out and weighed them. And you can see at day 15, there's not really a strong indicator that temperature actually is affecting their growth. So nothing significant. But the top line, the dashed line with the dotted lines on either side of it, you'll see that there is a statistically significant difference, or there is a trend in that line, and it is significant. And you'll see that we're looking at a temperature change of about 2 degrees. So we're not looking at massive, like 10 degrees difference. We were just trying to heat them up a reasonable or realistic amount. And you might be like, my favorite science question is, so what? Who cares? You know, is that a big surprise that when you increase the temperature, it would, mean that you would have a heavier tadpole? But what that does mean, is that a heavier tadpole will be most likely a heavier metamorph when they grow their legs and start to move out onto land. They have only a few short weeks to eat, and then they have to overwinter. And usually a larger size metamorph would mean a better chance of survival, and a bigger female in particular on the other side might mean that much more reproductive capability. So just to kind of point you to a direction, if you're more interested, there's a paper in Global Change Biology. You can read more about the findings of the warming effects on larval wood frogs. All right, so we're going to leave Churchill now and just jet over to the Mackenzie-Selwyn Mountains for a few minutes and talk a little bit about our work at altitudinal tree line there and some of the topics that we're working on that end of things. And this is really Steve's forte. And the great thing is here we have about a 40-year record that we're looking at. And I'm just going to show you a little sneak peek of what it looks like on the ground there. So this is a Pelsa field. So these are ice-cored mounds. And most of our work focuses on permafrost here and changing permafrost conditions. So on the graph on the right-hand side here, you see on the bottom, the graph goes from 1990 all the way up to 2019. We didn't make it into our field site in the Mackenzie Mountains this summer. And these are going through several different sites, the records we have of thaw depth. So thaw depth is the active layer zone, or the zone that thaws on top of the permafrost each summer. So each summer we go back on active layer grids and measure the thickness of the active layer. And again, the shaded area gives you an idea of the variability. And you can see at almost all of our sites, we see a declining trend of active layer thickness. So I'm going to try another little video here just to give you a sense of what one of these looks like from the air. So you'll see the Pelsa formation here. And just note, you can see the weather station here. And again, one of our snow stakes and the camera there. So you're seeing a little bit of our infrastructure. And this is drone footage that was taken flying over this. And I'm going to show you in another minute if you look carefully, you can see the outline of what the PELSA was probably like in the past. And we've got some air photo imagery we've worked with to look at PELSA loss in the Mackenzie Mountains. So these PELSAs are often in the valleys in this area. Okay, so here's some footage you'll see at sort of 20-year-ish intervals. So 1944 is the first shot that you see, and then in the 70s, and then in the 80s, and then into 2010. And you can see how much those PELSAs have shrunk. Some of the sites we're looking at 10%. So we've lost 90% of the PELSAs over the course of the record in the air photo imagery. There is a paper on this work on PELSA loss, and I can send that link along to Danny to pass along if anyone's interested. I apologize, I didn't put it on the slide here. And one of the things that when we're looking at long-term monitoring is, if we look at our thaw depths, we see that they're kind of chugging along, and then all of a sudden there's a large change. And you may have noticed that when you're looking at those air photo images. At first it didn't seem like there was a lot of change, but starting, in the mid 2000s, you might maybe see a bit of a decline, but definitely by 2010, you see this massive decline. And that's what we're seeing in a lot of the features in our Mackenzie sites, is that this rapid change. You reach a threshold and things are quickly deteriorating. So just one last aspect that I would point out is when you have these teams of citizen scientists who are coming to help you collect data, you actually, or from our perspective anyway, we really wanted to know something about, does someone participating in a citizen science team, does that actually make a difference? Are they going to go away not having just helped us collect data and feeling great about their scientific data collection experience? Or, are they going to feel like they've gained a lot of information and perhaps maybe even think about changing their habits or taking climate action? So we worked with Dr. Mark Gruhl from the University of Northern BC and conducted a program assessment over the course of about 18 months, where we did a pre-survey with our citizen science volunteers, a survey at the end of their time, and then a follow-up survey about 3 months later. So the results of this are published in Polar Geography, and we do find that people do take action. They do become very interested in climate change. They build a connection with the environment, but they also build a very strong connection with the people. And as scientists, that we have a responsibility to educate and do outreach, and this is definitely a powerful tool, using citizen science to influence individuals. How many people would that look like? In a normal year, we would have about 100 citizen scientist volunteers. We do 10 teams a year. Each team has about 10 people on it. And we rely heavily on the staff at the Churchill Northern Studies Centre to help do that. So Amanda Weingartner was one of my previous technicians on this. She's on this particular paper and helped with this project. All right. So it takes a lot of bodies to do citizen science project. We're extremely grateful for Earthwatch, who helps us recruit folks to come on our teams, helps provide us with insurance and make sure that we have good safety protocols in place to keep everyone safe. And it takes a dynamic team. So I mentioned Dr. Peter Kershaw. He's a retired professor at the University of Alberta, and then myself and Steve. So there's a picture from 2006 and just some shots of different teams, both in the Mackenzie Mountains on the right-hand side, and then teams in Churchill on the left-hand side. So we're going to move away from the citizen science piece right now and talk a little bit about career path. And Danny had indicated that she wanted to hear a little bit about, how I got to this chair. So you'll see I'm sitting in one of the Parks Canada red chairs. I've actually just recently moved to Parks Canada here in Churchill, still in Churchill, and the resource conservation manager, but still maintaining my research associate position at the study center because I do love teaching and working with the environmental science team. So we're just going to spend the next few minutes talking about how did I get to this chair. And folks who've been in Churchill with me, this is one of my favorite questions to ask my citizen science teams when they get to Churchill. On our intro, we say, so what brings you to this chair? How did you get here? So it all started a really long time ago. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but maybe you can guess from the picture. And again, people who know me, I think my mom instilled my love of pink dresses and mint green sweaters. And as I got older, I really loved winter. I enjoyed that time. I grew up on a dairy farm in Tillsonburg, Ontario, just outside of Tillsonburg. And I loved the winter time because that was the time when my parents weren't as busy on the farm, obviously still taking care of the cows, but maybe not baling hay and having crops out. I learned to skate at a really, really young age and loved that. And I was always scheming something. So I would just say my career path, I think, started young. I can look back and see my love of winter, my love of the cold, making a good scheme, making a good plan. So, you know, growing up in a small town and went to a very small school. There was 4 teachers in the school, and my mom was one of them, and my aunt was another one of them. And made it through to university. And this is not where I went to university, but where I did my first Arctic field work. So I did an undergrad degree at Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo in chemistry and physical geography. And I got the opportunity to head to Expedition Fjord and the Colour Lake region on Axel Heiberg Island to conduct my undergraduate thesis research. And this was an amazing opportunity. I had worked a couple summers in the South, doing some volunteer work, and also as an NSERC undergraduate research associate working for Dr. Mike Stone when he was doing his data collection on phosphorus analysis. And then getting the opportunity to go to the Arctic was amazing. And as an Arctic scientist now, I think I understand a little bit about why my supervisors probably chose me to go. A farm kid is definitely a great choice to go put in the middle of nowhere. They can probably take care of themselves. Not that other folks can't, but this was the landscape that I was introduced to. Massive glaciers, large sea ice covered fjords, and a small little lake tucked in the mountains. And just to prove, yes, I was actually there. We did do some camping. But mostly worked out of a field hut there. And so, yeah, proof that I was actually there. And what a great opportunity. So I would just encourage anyone, look for opportunities to get to interesting places, to do the kinds of things that you love, because that put me firmly on the path of being an Arctic scientist. I had no idea in undergrad that that's what I was going to do. If you would have asked me at one point in time, I probably would have told you I was going to be a concert pianist, not an Arctic scientist. So it's amazing how quickly things can change when you find something you love. I also spent some time in the Sawtooth Mountains just east of Eureka on Ellesmere Island, which is sort of central Ellesmere. So if you look closely in the middle foreground, you can see some tents there. I worked with 2 students who were doing glaciology work. So the glacier in behind is the glacier that we were working on. And hopefully the tents give you a little bit of sense of the scale of the landscape there. And that's where I got introduced to a few of the other great animals you can find in the Arctic, muskox, baby muskox in particular, what it's like to live in conditions on the glacier. And this was in 1993, sorry. It was one of the first years where many of the glaciers in the Arctic, especially the small valley glaciers, became entire ablation zones. The whole surface of the glacier was melting. And that's where I think really inspired also my interest in climate change and how it was impacting Arctic environments. And my supervisor at the time was Dr. Mike English at University of Wilfrid Laurier University, and Dr. Sherry Schiff at the University of Waterloo was then my master's supervisor in the following year. Just a few photos. And following on that, I went back to Axel Heiberg to conduct my master's work on Color Lake. This was our research team. And I think my piece from this was make some really great friends and find some really great mentors. In this picture is Miles Ecclestone. He was a technician at Trent. He's since retired, but he was a wealth of knowledge that I could learn from in particular. And in this shot, second from the right in the back is Dr. Wayne Pollard, a permafrost scientist at McGill University. These were folks that I was able to work with in the field and just learn so much from. So outside of your supervisors and your colleagues, find some great mentors. They'll provide you with key information and background throughout your life and your career as an Arctic scientist. And this is a shot from where I did my PhD at True Love Lowland. This was the base camp at the time. It's since been taken apart. It was one of the International Biological Program sites where they actually overwintered in the Arctic in the 70s. And one of the reasons I chose to work here was to work with Dr. Roger King. I did my PhD at the University of Western Ontario, and he had been working in the Arctic for 35 years at the time when I started to do my PhD work with him. He was at the end of his career and just an incredible wealth of knowledge. I learned so much from him, and he had done his PhD at this site. So he had the experience and knowledge beyond anyone, I would say, and just really great opportunities to see some great sites there, both in the lowland area and also on the plateau, and see the Devon Island ice cap. So a couple notes I would say that I learned along the way was I did learn after working on glaciers for a couple of years that they probably weren't my thing. They're big chunks of ice that don't really care. Apologies to anyone who is a glaciologist or loves working on glaciers. I love them, but it was a choice about making a career. And I was like, I'm not sure that that's something I want to do for the long term. But I did love the Arctic and the coastal lowlands, and that led me to eventually a job once I finished my PhD here in Churchill, Manitoba, at the edge of the Arctic. So I came south. I had never been to Churchill. I had never heard of the study center, but managed to land a job there, and that was really great. So I again found some really great mentors and some great research colleagues to work with. So Steve and Pete, and one of my technicians, Carly Basler. Some folks from the University of Waterloo and Wilfrid Laurier who had done degrees and were similar stages in their career to come and join me in Churchill and do some science here. This is Maren McRae, Brent Wolf, and Roland Hall. And also got to do a lot of really other interesting things outside of research. And I would just encourage folks along your career path to make sure you pursue other things. This is doing a snowy owl release in the springtime. So owls that had been injured or had been born in captivity were released into the wild in Churchill. And what a fantastic experience to be able to do things like that. Just having a great time with training and building relationships with young folks who are also trying to find their way is something I'm really inspired to do. And Danny is one of my previous students, and I suspect there's a few others on the call who've experienced mentoring in Churchill. This is Kat Jansen. She's now a heavy equipment mechanic in the Army. And maybe why stay for so long with one organization? Lots of people change around. The Churchill Northern Studies Centre underwent a facility renewal program, and this started about 5 years after I had come to the center. And it was a great opportunity for me to learn more and learn about building construction in the north, being able to design a 5,000 square foot lab and watch this new facility come into play. So looking for opportunities, not just outside of your job or things that you're really interested in, but within your job, like really looking for the opportunities where you can learn more and be able to still engage in some of those activities that you still love. So, always, citizen science, working with folks who are early in their career are two things that I'm quite passionate about. And here's my team from 2 winters ago out in the field. So this was the technician team that we had that particular winter. And I'm always excited to hear them go on to other things. Alex on the far right is doing a PhD now at University of Manitoba, and various other people off to other positions and work. And it's so great to hear where folks land. Here's a couple others doing ice augering. So trying to find out how deep the ice is in one of our freshwater lakes, a survey for Environment and Climate Change Canada. And expect the unexpected is the kind of the title of this particular slide. You may be wondering, what on earth am I looking at? And that's a really great question. So 3 years ago, the center embarked on a program to grow greens, leafy greens in particular, in a containerized format. So you're actually looking at the inside of a sea container that's been outfitted as a hydroponic garden. So this project fell underneath the science umbrella to get going. We were able to secure a major economic development grant from the Churchill Regional Economic Development Corporation under the Grad funding to purchase this shipping container and start growing things and having 1,600 plants a week to take care of. So I quickly hired a sustainability coordinator, is the title now, Carly Basler, who you've heard about before. She came back to work for us again at the center and takes care of our garden process. And I'm happy to say each week we harvest between 350 and 400 units. So a unit would be a package of lettuce or a package of herbs to go into our subscription service. So the container itself, the program is called Rocket Greens, a nod to the Churchill Rocket Range, which is right next door to our facility. It's now non-operational, but giving a nod to it by calling it Rocket Greens, and our subscription service, which is called the Launch Box. And if you want to learn more about that, you can visit the Study Center website. But this was also, I thought building a new building, being part of that was a huge challenge. Containerized gardening is also a really awesome follow-up. I also get to do some pretty incredible things along my path, a lot of long distance snow machine travel, maybe a couple 100 kilometers. My husband and I have a trap line, so we spend a lot of time inland as well. So these are all great adventures to have. Churchill just has the Arctic in general, but Churchill has some very spectacular pieces that are very near and dear and definitely kept me in Churchill. Seeing Northern Lights throughout the year is incredible. I can just step outside the door some nights and the whole sky is full of them. There's beluga whales in the summertime. I can throw my kayak in after a day of work and go for a paddle. Most of you know you can't have a presentation about Churchill without having an obligatory polar bear shot. So here's a shot of a couple polar bears, juveniles sparring, some play behavior that they undergo in the fall time while they're waiting for the ice to form. And I think just the whole collection of, loving Arctic science, the things that I'm able to do through my research associate position and years being science coordinator, and just the unique environment here. And I hear in one of the other webinars that you talked quite a bit about community and being involved in Indigenous communities. That's also something that I'm very passionate about, but didn't want to take time or didn't have the time to present it here and how we think about local community engagement. But I love being a member of the local community, living here for 18 years has really given me an opportunity to make contributions, and I just want to thanks to all the people who've made this career path for me possible, and continue to make my job and my work very, very interesting and entertaining. So I'll pass it back to you, Danny. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here so you can take over.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic and excellent timing. 7:45 on the nose. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to quickly share my screen. All right, can you see that? Click. All right. You can see the
I can see that.
stuff. Perfect. Okay.
Yes.
So we can, thank you so much, Leanne. Amazing. We can open up the floor to questions. So if anybody has questions, feel free to type them out either in the chat box or, like I mentioned before, at the bottom, there's an ask a question button. So feel free to type out any questions you have. I have a question to start. I'll get it started. When in your career did you first start thinking about working with citizen scientists?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think it really wasn't until I started maybe working in Churchill that it became a real possibility that I would be able to work with citizen scientists. I think I was always very interested in doing science outreach programs, going to my, the school I grew up in, or working with Let's Talk Science. Those are all really fantastic organizations. But when I started working at the study center, I was living here full time, had access to a facility where we could house people to come and do place-based learning. And then, someone had already started it. So seeing Dr. Peter Kershaw, operating a citizen science team, I was like, that is really cool. That's a way to both do outreach and engagement and also get really fantastic science data. So I wouldn't say it was something that was on my radar until I came to Churchill.
Well, I mean, you did a lot more than just the citizen scientist. You have all kinds of, you made sure there was all kinds of different programs to engage kids and stuff like that too. So
yeah, that's right. I think people who've been to Churchill it's a small community of about 850 people. There's about 150 kids between K to 12 in the school, and our goal, which we've never succeeded, is to have every school class come to the study center in 1 year. But I think we've had every kid come to the study center at some point over their school career. And one of the things we do is actually a high school credit course in June. So I think, Danny, you were part of working with one of those courses of students in the local high school.
Very cool. Thank you. And we don't have any other questions yet, so I'll ask another one. Can you tell us what your PhD research was on? Sure
can. It was definitely a while ago, but I had a really interesting background doing chemistry and physical geography. And my PhD supervisor, as I mentioned, had spent a lot of time working at that particular site and really wanted to make a connection between soil development, so how soils are made in catchments, especially in polar soils that are quite young. They haven't been around for a very long period of time. And the geochemical record that ends up getting recorded in lake sediment. So it was interesting for me to learn a lot about lakes and how they work in sediment deposition and soils, but I had the chemistry part nailed. So we were trying to use different techniques to try to see if we could match the stories of lake sediment and soil development, and if lake sediments held a record of early soil development. And that was my PhD research.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Okay, we have a message from Emma Trainer. Hi, in the future, is there another research topic or any other research topics that you would want to explore?
Great question, Emma. So I would say the amazing opportunity at the Study Center has been to be exposed to so many different research topics. So one of the challenges of working at a field station and not just doing your own research, but trying to help facilitate other folks' research is you have to learn a lot about things you don't know anything about. I remember the first time one of the Northern Lights researchers emailed me and was like, I need to do the fill-in acronyms that I had no idea. So I felt like I was always learning. I think in my own personal research, though, there's so many really great tools out there that I would like to investigate. So many more options that are available now with technology. And that's one of the things that I think would be the most interesting for me is I love, nutrient chemistry, as Danny will attest to, but being able to use the more technology to be able to do analysis in the field. So one of the things with chemistry that's really challenging often is you have to take samples back to a lab, or you have to preserve them and get them to a lab. And I'd really love to have to be able to explore more doing field analysis for even very particular things. And I think one way I saw this, I'll just maybe center out Camille from the lab where Danny is doing PCR and actually processing samples right on site in the lab. And that I was just so fired up about that. It was amazing.
We have another two questions. Okay, Matt Morrison. Hi, Matt. Hey, Leanne, thanks for the talk. It was so awesome to have you as a mentor early on in my career and introducing me to this world of science. Do you still keep in touch with your own mentors from your grad school or earlier career days? Why or why not?
Yeah, great question, Matt, and thanks for the shout out. Emma was also a previous Study Center person too, so happy to hear you're in a master's program, Emma and Matt back in Winnipeg doing a postdoc. So I do have to say my PhD supervisor, he passed away about 2 years ago, and he retired. I was his last PhD student, but he was always good for a laugh. And one of my favorite stories from him that I'll just take a moment to share is it took me a long time to finish my PhD. I actually got about 4 years in and decided that other things were more attractive. So I actually went and worked for a consulting company for a couple of years, and then I was like, you know what? 4 years is a lot of time. You really should go back and finish that. I don't like having a lot of unfinished things. So I went back and finished, and my PhD supervisor was then much closer to retirement by that point. And he would always hold a party at the end for his students. And so he sat down at the party, sat down on the couch beside me, and he was like, I never thought I was going to hold this party. And I was like, never thought you were either. Good thing we got together and finished this deal. And that was kind of the nature of our relationship. And I definitely kept in contact with him after he did retire. Mike English was my supervisor for my co-supervisor for my master's and also in my undergrad thesis. And he's actually retiring very soon now as well. I'm giving a talk next week for his retirement. So he's long been a supporter, and folks that I picked up along the way, mentors, I definitely still really highly value the mentors. Wayne Pollard would be another one, but they're becoming fewer and fewer as I get older and older. So I would say if you've got mentors who've helped you along the way, yeah, keep in touch with them, especially the great ones. And I personally love hearing from folks, and of course they show up on things like this too, so it means they're still interested in hearing what I have to say, which is awesome.
Thank you. Okay, we have another one from Morgan. Hi, Leanne. What would you say was the most defining moment for your career path when you were first starting out?
That's really interesting. I suspect it has something to do with for me a defining moment was having a professor in my undergrad come to me and sort of say, you know what, you should do this. You should apply for this this funding. You know, you'd be really great as a lab assistant, or you'd be, I can see your potential. And that may seem like a really small a small thing, but for me, I think growing up in a small town, and I went to university because I thought that would be a good plan, and really having professors who took individual interest in my career path and helping to guide / maybe force that along, and just really being invested in the individual. And that's something I've tried to pay it forward or take forward. And thanks, Morgan, for asking the question. I hope you feel that maybe Churchill was a defining moment for you. I don't know.
We have another one here. Hey, Leanne, great to be able to hear you speak about your work. You've mentioned the joy of being able to work with citizen science and mentor folks coming up through their career. What was the most helpful token of advice you've received from your mentors, and have you learned anything from your mentees?
Yeah, so I think the biggest piece from my mentors, and I heard this from many of them, is make sure you're doing something that you're inspired by, or something that you really feel passionate about. That's what's going to get you through some of those long days in the lab and some of the tedious data entry moments in science, and some of the frustrations of processing, statistical analysis. You have to do it because you're really passionate about it and you are inspired by it. And there will be moments of time when it's not that exciting and you don't feel that inspired. But that core of this is what gets you out of bed in the morning, and you do it because you love it. And I think for me that was particularly true. Folks who've been to the study center. It's a nonprofit organization, and as a typical nonprofit, you end up spending a lot of time and committing a lot of your soul, maybe even to it. And so it really does have to be something that you enjoy doing. And the best part of having mentees is just so much energy and excitement about things. My favorite example of this is, and some of you will attest to this, is when I see a polar bear, I'm like, oh, not another polar bear. And, someone else comes along, wow, it's a polar bear. And it may be the first one, the 20th one that they've seen. And I'm like, right, that is really, really cool. And I think that's maybe not something I learned, but definitely the piece of working with both citizen scientists and folks that I'm mentoring is just, it's nice to look through a different pair of eyes and be like, yeah, this is it. This is a great place to work. This is a great bunch of people to be with. And this is cool.
Agreed. Okay, we have another question from Alex Windsor. Hi, Alex. Hi, Leanne. Great to hear another one of your talks. You've shared lots of entertaining and memorable stories from your fieldwork experience in the past. Do you have a favorite Earthwatch story or memory from all the citizen scientist groups that you've had the chance to work with?
Oh man, I don't know if I can pick a favorite. There's just so many. There's so many great memories. And I think as you, Alex, know, and many of you know, that there's each team has its own flavor. And usually its own character, both the team itself and a character within the team. So I'm not sure I could pick a really favorite. I do think one of maybe the ones that creep up the list are people who show up on our winter teams who've actually never seen snow before. I almost put this picture, this wasn't made me think of it. I almost put a picture, and we had an architect who was from Melbourne in Australia, and he had never really encountered like serious snow before, and showed up full kit of gear. I don't know how he managed to find baffin boots that fit him, and the first thing he said was, I didn't expect the snow to be so cold. I was like, that's an interesting comment from someone who's extremely educated. But we just had a great time. That whole, that whole team was an interesting bunch. But yeah, I would just ask if Alex was able to share, any of you, what your favorite story is, because I've tortured you all with having to work with Earthwatch teams if you've worked in Churchill.
Oh, yes, I can think of a few stories as well. Okay, it looks like we've reached the end of the comments, which is perfect because we're right on the nose for an hour. Yeah, so I guess just to finish things off, once again, thank you so much for doing this, Leanne. And then also, this webinar series, we're going to continue after Arctic Change 2020, which is next month. So make sure you follow us on social media, the Arctic Student Association, and we will be posting when we have new speakers coming up. So yeah, thank you, Leanne, and it was really nice to see you.
Yeah, thanks very much, everyone, and thanks to all those people who've joined. I hope I was able to share a few interesting tidbits and encourage you in your career path as you move along. If you have any questions, definitely pass them along, and either Danny can send them, or most of you know me, you can grab my email address off the Study Center webpage and drop me a line.
Perfect. All right. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Stay safe.